Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining this session of our webinar, which is called How to Create Great Assessment Ready CMMC Documentation. I want to start by welcoming our speakers, but in the middle of that, we've put up a poll that just to get some background information on everybody that will help us craft our answers to you better. So I want to start by welcoming our speakers, but before I do that, just describe the objective of our session today. This in 30 minutes, we're not going to give you everything you need to know about how to create assessment ready CMMC documentation. That cannot be done in 30 minutes. Rather, the goal for this session is to give you enough background information so you can decide the best way to get it done. Whether A, go it alone, completely do it yourself and figure it out. B, do it with some tools or assistance like a GRC tool that Luis will talk about his company makes. Prevail offers something called a compliance accelerator with lots of videos and stuff with some tips. So create the documentation with some help. Or third, get even more help and outsource the creation of documentation to a consultant. So hopefully we can give you enough perspective in the next 30 minutes or so you can make an educated call for yourself. But we're going to do that by talking about documentation, what's good, what's bad, what to think about. We have three folks joining us today, one of whom we're dealing with some technical difficulties, but Manas Das is here from Strategic IT Solutions. He's a C3PAO. Luis Batista is here from Cyber Comply Group. They make a GRC tool and also do some consulting. And Alex Imani, who I'm expecting will join any minute, who's from Mazar, is also a C3PO. Why don't I start by having each of you just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your company, and before we get the whole session started. And I'll welcome Alex, who just joined us as well. But Luis, do you want to start? Well, Luis, you're muted, by the way, on Zoom.
I was about to say that those were having some technical issues, but it wasn't the mute button. Just bear with us on that line. I was first an RPO, that's a registered practitioner organization under the Cyber AD, and we quickly realized that you really needed a tool to manage all this documentation, policies, evidence. You can do that on SharePoint, you can do it on Excel, you're going to drive yourself crazy. But really, where this comes into play is the maintenance of it. And when your C3PAO comes in to do an audit, they have somewhere specifically to go to for all this information. We also built a tool called cybergap.us for free CMMC 111.2 self-assessment. You enter the information from your scoping, very important, but it doesn't create an SSL or a code or anything like that. For that, you need a GRC. And there are others on the market. We've developed ours specifically for CMMC.
Thank you, Luis. Just one more thing, just 10 more seconds. What does GRC tool mean?
I know we start using all these acronyms.
No, but in plain English, what do people?
Risk and compliance. That's the acronym, but basically it's the governing of the information. You're controlling the risk, and you're complying with this framework. In this case, CMMC level 2. But I always laugh about the acronym because most people don't know what ATM stands for. Yeah, a lot of acronyms in the premise.
Thank you. Manas, a little bit about you and your company?
Sure. First of all, happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. So my company's name is Strategic IT Solutions. We are located in the DC metro area on the Northern Virginia side. I'm a lead CCA myself, and we have been focusing on level 2 assessments mostly. We've completed several of them, and many of them are Prevail clients. So we and our roster of almost 15 to 16 assessors, most of them are very familiar with Prevail technology, Prevail's capability, and Prevail's compliance package. Which allows us to save time during the assessment, and we basically pass those time as saved cost to our client. Okay, so like I said, documentation is very important. I know Randy will be talking about that, but only thing I want to give a disclaimer that seems like the Prevail seminar is bringing the Zoom server down, so I'm getting kicked out several times. So just bear with me. If I'm out, I'll come back immediately. All right, back to you, Randy.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to you again because the way we're going to format this discussion here is I want to hear from our panelists. What are some things that they want everybody to know about creating good documentation, things that may not be obvious? Also, like to hear some, kind of stories from people who've been there before. If you walk into a client and you're an assessor and you think things are looking great, and this is going to be going to you, Manas, in a second, and you think things are looking great, what about what you're seeing made you feel that way? What is it? What are the indicators of excellent documentation? So a two-part question for you. First, what are some things you want everybody in our audience to know when preparing CMMC documentation? And then give us some examples of you see stuff that's really good. Why is it really good? What made it good?
Absolutely. And how much time do we have? I can talk about that for hours. I'm guessing a couple of minutes probably, right?
Yeah, take no more than 2 hours. I think people will want to see the response less than that.
Definitely, definitely. So I know between CMMC 1.0 and CMMC 2.0, many of the controls that are related to policy procedure documentations were taken out of the requirement, but nevertheless, the documentation is necessary. And the way I look at it is that your policy talks about what you are doing, what you are doing to meet the CMMC control. Your plan talks about how you are doing that. So, and that plan can be a process or procedure or a technology or a combination of both. And your artifacts are basically demonstrating that you are actually doing that. So the whole combination is your documentation, right? So it's not just one single thing. And in simple terms, the example that I gave to many of our clients is that let's assume that in your household, your policy is that no internet for the kids after 9 o'clock in the night. So that's your policy. How you're implementing is maybe a process that's one of the parents goes down and turns off the router at 9 o'clock every night. It can be a technology. You have a script that runs every night at 9 o'clock and turns them off. Or it can be a combination of both. The script doesn't run automatically. One of the parents has to run the script and it automatically turns off the router connection for the kids only. Okay. Then let's say the grandparents or the assessors or auditors, they come in and say that, hey, you said you will make sure that your kids don't get to internet every night after 9. So they will do several processes to check. Tell us you are doing it. So the parents can show the router log to show that every night at 9 o'clock it turns off. They can look at the script. They can check with the kids. They can interview them and say that, show me you can go to the internet after 9. And they'll say, we can't. And they can try and that will show that they cannot. So the whole end to end is the documentation, right? So you have to think from that perspective. Now, can you combine some of the policies with the plans? Sure, you can. Whatever works best for your organization, you should adapt to that documentation policy. Okay. So the other thing I would say to address your other question, Randy, about the good documentation versus what will be a good documentation. What I look for is not an oversimplified, not an overcomplicated documentation. At the same time, this connection between what they are doing, how they are doing it, and the demonstration that they are doing it. And a great way to do it is that, one, we will not know until we go for the final assessment and we interview. And of course, during the readiness assessment, we get a view of what they have. But just having the documentation is not enough. The people who are using that, the users, the privileged and non-privileged users, they should also know what their policies are, what their procedures are. They can talk to it. This should be part of the culture of the organization, right? So, and also one thing that helps a lot for us assessors, some kind of tracking mechanism saying that, okay, these are the different controls and objectives, and this is how we are managing them, the what and how aspect of that, right? So, and a well-organized, well-formatted documentation is something that we look for. I mean, I can go, like I said, I can go on hours for what will be the good characteristics, but we just definitely don't have the time. But I would say that it should talk about what they are doing and how they are doing.
Great, thanks. Alex, welcome, welcome. So glad we could resolve technical difficulties.
Great to be here.
And great, and we can hear you. Wonderful. I've got a two-part question for you. Part A is just an introduction because we missed that. Just a little bit, introduce yourself, your company, and what you guys do. And then Manoj was just talking about some things he saw in excellent documentation. I'd love to know the other side because we all want the dirty little details. If you walked into a client and it was just, not going to fly, what was it about it that's made it stink?
Absolutely. Just to introduce myself, Alex Amani, I'm a senior manager at Forbes Mazars. We are an authorized C3PAO. I lead many of our level 2 assessments and look forward to sharing some insights here. Relevant to that question, around poor documentation, I would say, documentation is going to be your roadmap, your North Star for the assessment. That is the first thing an assessor is really going to look at for your environment. So it is critically important to put your best foot forward. Um, at a high level, the things we've seen that are poor in terms of documentation are not strictly versioning controlling between policy, procedure, and standard. So always making sure that there's a revision table, clearly defining who's been the last reviewer, the last date of review is critically important. Building on a point Manos made, relevant to what good documentation looks like. We see a lot of policies and even procedures say we shall do this, we shall configure a session timeout. And really, you do need to address the how, whether that's in a policy or a procedure type document. You do need to get specific and get into some granular detail and really describe how you're doing, security at your organization. One last piece I'd call out is whenever we see a policy document, we always like to see, applicability and responsibility statements. From an assessor standpoint, that tells us, what pieces of the scope might this policy apply to, and number two, who can we talk to in terms of, ensuring this policy is being enforced, and so that we can validate the security controls are there as described.
And what makes it, a stinky one?
Really, when it's written too generally is stinky. When it's, when there's conflation of your organizational policy, procedure, or standard, and how those different type of documents are being used, incredibly stinky. Anytime we can't really read a policy and understand how the, certain objectives in the framework require parameters to be defined, say your password length needs to be defined. Well, we need to see that in a policy. We can't just, see a blanket statement that strong passwords are required. So, these documents do need to be fairly specific. And I think that's probably the biggest gap we see on documentation, the specificity side.
Thank you. And now for Luis, you're a little less on the assessment side, but you help people get prepared and you make tools that help people get prepared. What are some of the things you want, our audience to know when preparing documentation? And what are some of the things maybe you wished your clients understood before they even engaged with you?
Well, first of all, I think we determined who the smartest one in this group is. It's not me. I'm not a CCP or CCA, let alone a C3PAO. The C3PAOs, just to be clear, are the ones that actually do the audit, right? What we provide is a tool to centralize, and you're hearing the word document a lot, you're hearing the word policies a lot. You haven't heard so much the word evidence, and this ability to track who has done what to what policy, latest, and how that's getting distributed within your organization is what a government risk and compliance tool does. It's a CRM for lack of simpler term, a CRM for CMMC. What Prevail does is it takes a lot of those controls off of your shoulder and onto the shoulder of Prevail, including capacity to store CUI, which a GRC, our type of tool does not. Our tools do not store CUI or FCI. What was the second part of the question?
Anything you wish, your clients understood before they engaged you that would have made the whole engagement smoother?
I belong to an organization that, a national organization, a nonprofit that helps, the DoD, the DID, process the CMMC, requirement. And I think the biggest thing I'm seeing from a pretty high level is, it was, the boy who cried wolf for years, right? And now it's real. November 10th gets, the actual, enforcement of it goes into FARs. So I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing is not even so much on where the documentation is, because wherever it is, we can organize it, put it somewhere where it should be, and everybody can access it. But not getting this started, because this is not a simple process. This is gonna take, I'm seeing things in the chat, 1 month, 3 months. No, this is gonna take considerable amount of time and effort on both the consultant side and the client side. The client's still gonna be responsible for a lot of this work, even as you're working through this remediation.
Yep. Maybe I could just build on that just a little bit, and then we can turn to some audience questions or some other things that come up a bunch. But I just observed, we've had on the order of 50 of our customers get perfect scores on CMMC/NIST 800 171. And we've had some that have done just the opposite, haven't done as well. And what we've seen is the ones that have taken it really seriously realize that it did kind of touch a lot of aspects of their business, really think through what's in scope, careful about documenting things, the opposite end of the spectrum is, I will say at Prevail, we have to be compliant with a bazillion different things. The easiest of which is SOC 2. And there's a lot of companies that, do a SOC 2 compliance, and it's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. And maybe they had experience making the person who staffs the front desk in the lobby responsible for that. But we've seen some cases where people, put somebody in charge like that. Hey, it'll be a nice learning experience for CMMC. And they just got totally overwhelmed. They bought some off-the-shelf documentation. They used that as their submittal. It didn't match what they were actually doing, even that kind of extreme. So I think, this thing about taking it seriously. We only have a few minutes left, but a couple of, I'm just looking at the discussion here in the chat. Looks like we're answering questions directly here, but maybe if any one of you guys would like to volunteer, what are the capabilities and/or capacity does one need in an organization to do this in-house? If you were, I don't know, Alex, maybe you take this one, advising somebody, what should they expect in terms of capability and/or capacity?
It's a great question. It depends where you're starting. If you are starting near scratch, where you don't have a full IT policy set, you do need significant capabilities and capacity to generate those from scratch. You can use tools to help you. You can use templates to help you. With that said, the person drafting all of your policies needs to have a really good grasp on your IT security operation and really how it interfaces with the CMMC requirements, if that's your primary compliance requirement. So I would say there is a significant capability requirement no matter what approach you do. You do need to really understand end-to-end the security program at the organization. From a capacity standpoint, creating very sufficient policies is a time-consuming process. Policies, procedures, or the system security plan. So in a lot of organizations, it could be a full-time resource, or at least for a period of the year, full-time, to do reviews of those, facilitate reapprovals and things like that. So overall, I do view documentation as a fairly heavy lift, especially starting from that scratch point.
If I may, Randy, I'll agree with Alex. I think there is, from a capability standpoint, many companies do have the capability, but what happens is that they not only need to understand the cultural, the institutional knowledge of what their control should be, they also need to understand the CMMC, what CMMC requires. They need to marry those to come up with what the policy procedure should look like, right? And from a capacity standpoint, particularly in the small businesses, 95% of people are client facing. They are probably billable, something. So many companies tend to pull people out of those engagements to work on this documentation. So this is a balance. I understand that some companies have to do it. This is a balance. If it impacts their client interaction or billability, that's something to think about, right? So that's how I would balance the capability and capacity questions.
Just following that just a little bit, then I'm going to turn to you, Luis, in a second. Trent raises, a very specific question. I got a 30-person startup, in-house from scratch. What do you think? Might you say, unless you could dedicate one of your 30 people for 6 months exclusively, do it, then outsource? I'm just putting that out there. I don't know. What do you think?
You want me to take that one, right?
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to do complete hands-off because this is a continuous process. This needs to be part of your culture. Even if it's a small enclave that you establish and only 4 or 5 out of your 30 people are using that enclave for CY data, it still is part of that culture of those 5 people. It's very hard to do it complete turnkey that someone else does, throws it over the wall and you implement it. That can be done. So one, there needs to be executive involvement. There need to be bottom line involvement, and anyone who is doing that work, they should know what's going in. So you can hire people to write your documentation, but at the end of the day, you are doing this, right? So I hope that answers this question instead of mudding it even further.
It's a hard one to answer, admittedly. Just to move along, Anthony, this is for you, Luis, raises a question. Other than your free tool, are there other websites or advice or places, that you can give to people on, where they should get more information to figure this out?
What's gonna happen is the DoD is gonna direct you one of 2 places, Apex Accelerators. There are 500 DoD consultants. It's an Office of Small Business program. Funded initiative, and the other is Project Spectrum. You're going to hear a lot about Project Spectrum. The issue is, real quickly, that Apex Accelerator consultants, they're not experts in CMMC. They're going to point you here, there, everywhere. The Cyber AB is the best place to go, really, at the end of the day. Project Spectrum is doing what they can. You're going to hear a lot from them, and I'm trying to work with them and Apex on the national level to create some type of standard or centralized resource for the consultants themselves, so they can then pass on that assistance. But I would stick to the Cyber AB and official .gov and within the Cyber AB ecosystem, definitely.
Alex, I'm going to throw one that's probably hard to answer at you here for a second. It's one of the most important questions that everybody starts with is scope. What employees are in scope, what systems are in scope. How the hell do you figure this out?
That's a great question, and sort of tracking it back to documentation. I think scope is relevant CMC is most easily understood when you do diagram out your system environment. So you understand where your boundaries are, how CUI comes in, where it goes out, and then are able to, at a starting point, put a box around it. Of course, the precursor is understanding what your CUI is at the organization and being able to map the data flows. Once you do that, saving any sort of architectural scoping minimization techniques, you would really understand all the assets in your assessment boundary, and from there would want to define which ones actually touch CUI, which ones might be a risk managed asset. Things outside of that boundary would be your out of scope assets. So I'll offer that. It's always best to start really just start drawing, even if it's not a napkin, what your systems are, what your network looks like, and then overlay your CUI data flows to that and start putting boundaries around it, and ultimately determine a scope. The diagram is the documentation piece you want to, I think, pay attention to most on scope, and don't be afraid to add narratives explaining why certain things are out of scope that might not be readily apparent if you're using strategies like, Prevail potentially as one, enclave strategy there.
I'm going to add one little thing to this is also people. Not everybody in an organization touches CUI. The more you can limit this scope, the easier your life will be, right? If your finance people are not looking at engineering drawings that have CUI in them, as long as the contracts they're looking at themselves don't have CUI in them, then maybe they don't need to be in scope, and you can have different solutions. We need to move on. I would love to keep going, but we have to move now to a quick little bit where we've got some quiz questions for folks and some giveaways. So I have to turn it over to our sponsor. But thank you all. Before we do that, I especially want to thank Alex and Luis and Manas for taking their time to join us today. It's great to have their knowledge and expertise. Thank you all for joining us and for helping provide 80% of the answers to the questions in the chat. So I think that helped make it a productive session too. So thank you all.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you all.